Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 13th. Did you get that? Let me start again. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 13th webinar with me, Deniz Hughes, and I'm here today with an extra special guest, Brian Schmidt, who is a game expert, aficionado, amazing human being person. Say hello, Brian.
Hello.
There he is. And then we also have, as always, Steve Wilder Blumenthal, hooray, who is not in Los Angeles this time around.
Hey, everybody. I am home in Philadelphia for the holidays. My family.
Yay! So happy holidays to you and happy holidays to everybody. And thank you so much, Brian, for this. This is just really wonderful to have you here. This is the 13th webinar. There are 12 others. Thank you so much for being here. We're really thrilled to be doing this. This is really going to be different because this webinar is all about games and game music. So thank you for your support. As always, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you like a video, like it. If you want, you could go to my Facebook fan page. But Mr. Schmidt, do you have a fan page on Facebook?
The best Facebook page for me is GameSoundCon.
GameSoundCon. We will put the link below so that you should go there and like it. You know, fan pages are kind of a funny thing on Facebook. But in any case, there is a Facebook group that belongs, well, it has my name on it. It belongs to all of you. It's called For Film Composers Only. Please take a look at that if you haven't already. And is there anything that I'm missing, Steve? Can you?
So far, so good, I think. We mentioned the Facebook pages and everything.
Yes.
All good.
And also wanted to. Yeah. So also wanted to mention that Steve here is going. Well, he's going to be actually looking through your comments. So please pose all of your questions in the comments section on the YouTube page, and he will be reading them, and he can pose them, and hopefully we'll have a really great dialogue happening. So let me just do something here, and I've done it, and now let's see. Yeah, there we go. So without further ado, I think that's it. Usually I say something like, this is not enough. Invest in yourself if you want to succeed as a composer in media, whether it's for film or games. You know, there are people like me who are, I call us film composer consultants. Please take a look at my website, and there are other people that I'd be glad to refer you to, but it'll make things easier for you as you try to break into the business. So please, the other request that I have is please keep your questions relevant to the topic, which is game music and all about game composers. That's kind of a broad topic, so we'll see how it goes there. So without further ado, I'm going to do an introduction about our special guest. I'm going to try to fly through this, so bear with me. He, Brian Schmidt, is one of the true pioneers of the game audio industry and the recipient of the Game Audio Network Guild's Lifetime Achievement Award. And our Brian Schmidt has been creating game music, sound, and cutting-edge technology for over 25 years with a credit list of 130 games, over 130 games. Do you ever sleep? What is that? What is that? He is the creator of GameSoundCon, which is the industry's only conference dedicated specifically to composing video game music and video game sound design education. He is an in-demand speaker who has given literally hundreds of educational and inspirational talks at events all over the world, and we're so happy that he's here because he's going to give us a really good talk today. Just wanted to also mention he's earned degrees in computer science and music, and he's got his master's in computer applications and music from Northwestern University. He also worked at Microsoft for 10 years, and he joined the then fledgling Xbox organization as the primary architect for its audio and music system. And he currently works as a consultant to the video game industry, and he works with companies large and small, and he's making us feel very large right now. So welcome, Mr. Schmidt. It's nice to see you. Nice to see you, Brian.
Nice to see you. I've been watching these from the other side, so it's fun to be on this side of the window for a change.
Yeah, well, you're always welcome whenever you'd like. Yes. So let me just ask you some questions. These are just some questions that I had coming. I just thought of. Well, who does the hiring in video games? If you're a composer, you know, how do you go about getting work as a video game composer?
That's a really good question. And it actually depends a lot on the kind of game, right? Video games is a very, very broad category these days. It's kind of like if you lumped, you know, Spielberg movies and indie films and television shows and Hallmark movies and TV commercials and student projects all into one category and called that, you know, media. And said, well, who does the hiring in media? So it's very, very different depending upon what kind of games you're looking at. A couple definitions that I might find myself throwing out, just so you know what I'm talking about. There's a style of game we sometimes call AAA games, and those are the big blockbuster games, the Halos, the Call of Duties that take years and 3-4 years to develop and cost $70 million to make and have huge advertising budgets, and so those are AAA. Those are like the big selling Xbox games. You see TV commercials for them and whatnot.
And Call of Duty, that kind of thing.
Call of Duty, that kind of thing, exactly.
Yeah.
So if I say AAA game, that's kind of what I'm referring to. There's a whole other category of games called casual games, which are smaller in scale, and they range kind of from, 2 people forming an independent company, maybe doing it full time. It's not hobbyist, but it's much smaller scale. They might come out with a game in 3 to 5 months, a much smaller scope. There's also a level of casual game which are professionally developed. These are developed by some of the big studios, games like Peggle and created by companies like PopCap, Electronic Arts, and so on. Those are kind of in the middle, where it's professionally funded and developed, but it's not this big, giant, 5-year project with 250 people on it. So we kind of sometimes, those are called casual core, sometimes those are just another kind of casual game. So there are those, and then there's what we sometimes term indie games, and that's kind of what you would think. That's, usually not well funded at all. Usually it's might be a part-time gig for somebody. Students do indie games a lot, and so there are a lot of those. And so depending upon what kind of game it is, and what genre it is, what style it is very different who ends up hiring you. For the AAA space, almost always what happens is these studios have a full-time employee on staff with the title of audio director. And the audio director is the person responsible for all the noise that comes out of the speakers. Whether it's music or sound effects or dialogue or whatever. And so at some point, they're kind of figuring out what composer should be hired, what voice talent do we need, what are the schedules for getting everything done, and also kind of what's the creative direction they want, right? If they're going to hire the composer, they've got in their brain what this game needs to sound like, and so who I should get to hire for that. So that's the audio director. And is
I'm sorry, I'm having some trouble with Google, so I might just step out for a second and pop back in, but I did want to ask you, are most audio directors composers or musicians, or are they game people?
Virtually every audio director has been a composer and or sound designer at some point in their life.
No. Well, excuse me while I bow out. You know how Google is. This is an amazing piece of technology, but it also has its own brain. It's like pinging me like crazy. So please forgive me. I will see you in a minute. Continue amongst yourselves.
Sure, no problem. So right, for AAAs, you want to get to know audio directors because they're the people who can hire you. And this is where I've seen some things on Deniz's page where, hang out with directors. It doesn't do you a lot of good to hang out with other composers. Games, that's just the opposite. In games,
Interesting.
your fellow
Okay.
composers that you're hanging out with now, that buddy you went to get pizza with or got drunk with at some event.
Yeah.
Well, a year and a half from now, it turns out he's audio director at a studio for electronic arts. And
okay, that's really interesting. Yeah.
And the smaller, the professionally developed casual games like PopCap and so on are usually a similar route where there's an audio director. Now it's going to be a much smaller team, but it's similar kind of thing. There's a guy Whitmore, who is the audio director of PopCap Game, who is has the vision for what PopCap's games should look like. So Fueled and things like that. That's where it goes. And when he needs people to do things, he kind of assembles them.
So it's kind of like, it's similar to almost like a music producer or a music supervisor in a way in the film industry. They kind of know what they want, and then they have people in mind to kind of give a call to.
Exactly.
In a way. Okay.
That's a great analogy.
That's really interesting. I never knew about this at all. Yeah.
Have you ever done that yourself, Brian? Have you ever had
I was audio director, a long time ago back at a company called WMS. And I've served sort of as a external audio director a couple times where even though I was serving the audio director role, I was still a consultant. That's a little unusual, but it still happens. Usually the audio director is a full-time employee of the company.
So what is it like to be a composer who is on staff at a game company? I know a lot of composers adore the idea of being on a staff where they don't really have to worry about the day-to-day stresses of being a freelancer. So here is this unusual position where a composer can actually be on a salary and compose music. What is it like?
It's fun. I've been both. We joke, right? There are in-house composers and out-house composers, right? So I've been both in-house and out-house, in-house and consultant. There definitely are, companies have in-house composing jobs, and it is really great, and it's great for a couple of reasons. One is that you do have you're an employee on par with the programmers or the management or the whomever, so you've got vacation time and retirement and usually health insurance and the whole 9 yards for that, and steady paycheck and all that is really good. One of the things that's really, really nice about being in-house is that you really are part of that game team. You live and you breathe them, and you have lunch with them, and you go out after work with them, and you live and breathe that game for a much greater period of the game than you usually do as a freelance composer coming in. But a freelance composer coming in, and maybe we'll talk more about this later, but there's different sort of things you can do as a freelance composer. Maybe all you're doing is looking at their spec and writing a bunch of cues to what they said they need.
So
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask about, so being on staff as a composer, do you have like your own studio within that studio, have like your own workspace there? Are you writing music like literally alongside while they're programming? How does that work exactly?
It's a little bit iffy because what tends to happen sort of, on paper, you're right. What tends to happen is, let's face it, if you're a full-time game music composer with a steady job and a steady paycheck, what's the first thing you go out and spend your money on? A great home studio, right?
Yes, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Very often the case that, and again, this depends on the size of the company. It's not uncommon for the audio director's home studio to just kick ass compared to the studio that's provided there. Now, a big company like Microsoft, that'll be different. But for medium-sized companies of 20 people, they're not going to invest in a big sound studio. So there's a little bit of there's a lot of work at home that goes on if you're an in-house composer because, let's face it, when you want to compose, you want to be isolated. You don't want distractions. You don't want emails. You don't want IMs. You don't want Facebooks. You don't want Google Hangouts. You just want to be alone and compose, and so people can be very productive at their home studios. but then they need to be in sort of the core hours for business meetings and team meetings and status updates and talking with the designer, talking with the programmers, and things like that. So, but being in-house is very fun, and you can. Then one of the really nice things about it is you can really push these kind of creative, technical boundaries in a really interesting way because you have the freedom to try things out a lot more, right? It's easier to convince the team, hey, let's go down this path for 3 weeks because I think it'll be really cool, and then have it suck.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And yeah.
But if you're a freelancer and you're like, hey, I got a great idea. Why don't you pay me for 3 weeks to do this, and it'll be really cool. And then if it doesn't turn out then you're like, oh, great, he just got us for another 3 weeks of work. Great.
You're in trouble. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So how does a composer get hired? How does a composer find these people, these contacts for these sorts of situations?
It's like anything else in the music.
Like anything else. Yep. Back square one, folks.
Be incredibly prepared.
Yeah.
Be really good. Be professional. Be nice to everybody you meet.
All the time.
People will remember a jerk. The word about a jerk spreads really fast and really far. And network with people that, first of all, it's fun to hang out with other composers. So there's conferences to go to. There's online communities to be at.
Is there ever a situation where a company is in need of a composer and they'll put an ad out like a regular job, or is this the sort of thing where someone gets
word of mouth kind of deal?
Yeah.
Usually for in-house composers, companies, because of a company policy, will require a job be posted externally.
Gotcha.
Even if they have maybe either an in-house person they maybe want to promote to that, or if they have a particular freelancer in mind that they want to bring in-house, typically they'll post that. As far as contract work, that's largely networking and word of mouth. So networking, getting to know people and hang out with people is.
And where are these job notices posted usually?
A few different places. There are a couple different organizations that are really good to belong to. I'm going to plug one. Disclaimer is 2 years ago I took over as president of GANG, the Game Audio Network Guild.
Yay! The president!
So that's website for that is audiogang.org. We're a nonprofit organization that does a lot of community outreach. And it's also, every year we host we call them the annual GANG Awards.
I will include the link below as well. So
it's in the description, yeah.
Yeah,
the
so
link there.
if people are watching a recording of this, they will be able to go into the description and see the link. So.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. So yeah, one of the things we do is we host the GANG Awards, which we've got about 18 categories to recognize excellence in game audio, music and sound design and dialogue, sound effects, interactivity, and so on. So we do that, and we host, we do a lot of student mentoring and things like that. But it's also, we put on a lot of sort of live events. We did one at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music about a month ago, which included people could pre-submit 60 seconds of demo music, and we had a live panel of working game audio composers, critique them in front of the crowd. So I think we do things like that, or we'll have a post-mortem on, music for World of Warcraft, or music for Call of Duty, or interactive music in Peggle 3, or something like that. Yeah. So we do lots of those sorts of things. So that's a great organization to get involved with and be part of that community. There's another really good organization, again, of course, talking about games now, called the IGDA, International Game Developers Association. That is overall game developers, and it is important. There is a good analogy here with what I've seen on Deniz's site. You do want to not just hang out with composers and sound designers. You do want to hang out with game designers and game producers.
It's the same as in film. If you want to break into film, you don't really want to hang out with composers. You want to hang out with directors.
Right.
Well, anybody else who's working, I mean, editors, animators.
You definitely want to do both because the game, like we said before, the game composer you're hanging out with now is the audio director next year. So it's good to just be known and networked in both the circle of game composers, but also try and be part of online and in-person communities in the game development community. There is a must-attend conference if you're serious about doing games, and it's well, there are really two. One of them's mine, but the one I was going to talk about was the Game Developer Conference, gdconf.com. gdconf.com.
Yeah.
That is the really, really, really big international game developers conference. It's every spring in San Francisco. It's early this year. It's actually March 2nd. And that's 25,000 people descend on Moscone Center and talk about game development.
I'll include the link to that below as well. Why not? Have everybody all connected and ready to go. Absolutely. Yeah.
Another great conference, disclaimer, this is the one I run, is GameSoundCon.
You're not going to do a disclaimer. It's the best, right? So
it was pretty fun this year. We had 300 people this year at the Millennium Biltmore.
Nice.
So what you're talking about, the one that you organize and put together, is a conference that's specifically for game composers. That's so.
Yeah, well, it originally started out for film composers and TV composers who want to do games.
Right.
That's still a big component of it, but it's now expanded to also just include anybody who does games as well.
And
so
that's in October, is it? It's in the fall? Yes?
Yeah, you usually have it in the fall. We haven't set the date for 2015 yet.
Okay. Yeah, it was like a month or two ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Over and up.
So yeah, becoming part of both the online and virtual communities can be really important and a good place.
That's actually a very good point. That what you're talking about is to be present, in real life and in the virtual social media world. It's really interesting.
Well, that's how I came across your name, is in the virtual social media world.
That's right. Who knew me before? So, Steve, how are we doing with the questions? Do we have any comments? Do we have any questions?
We do, yeah. We have a couple good ones from Lex Dumitru. What Lex is asking, the first one is, how important do you think programming and various game engines knowledge is important for a composer or sound designer in order to be able to deliver?
That's an excellent question. That's a spectacular question.
Yeah.
I'm going to answer it glibly, then I'll answer it more seriously.
Okay.
The glib answer is, how badly do you want to work?
Okay.
The more serious answer is, and this is something that I hear from audio directors of the major studios, all sorts of people in the industry. To the extent that all you can do for a game is look at the spec they gave you, write some cues, and put them on Dropbox, you are the most replaceable member of that game team. To the extent that you can look at a game that's in early design, figure out what it needs, maybe do some light audio scripting, which is sort of programming light, to help get this music into the game in the way that it needs to be gotten into, the way you envision it. The more of that you can do, that is going to set you apart from 99 out of 100 other people who also want that gig.
Interesting.
It's a really, really good skill to have if you want to differentiate yourself. Now, is it essential? I mean, the way I sometimes answer this is, if picture yourself in a ballroom in Los Angeles where they invited the top 1,000 composers in Los Angeles. If you can look around that room and say, without hesitation and doubt and with honesty, I am the best 2 or 3 of the people in this room without question, then forget what I said. You don't need to know how to program. Go orchestrate, go compose, whatever.
Go be John Williams, yeah.
If that's not you, then look for ways which you can differentiate yourself. There are various different ways to do it, one of which is being able to be more technical and talk more turkey than the next guy. And that really, really helps you with is retention, where when you've worked on a game with somebody, you've now shown your value at how much easier you can make the other team members do it. Because, and that, again, when it comes time to hire the next time, they'll be like, oh, wow, this person really knew the stuff. We didn't have to handhold them.
I find that it doesn't take very much to separate yourself from everybody else as a composer. It just takes some know-how, but it doesn't take a lot. Like, just to be a good person, for example, it doesn't seem, you know what I'm saying?
Being trusted, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
just
yeah.
trustworthy or just being a little bit extra pleasant. I mean, there are those factors as well. And then, as you're saying, if you're able to foresee what the game is doing and be able to communicate clearly in an articulate way to people who are not musicians what you're thinking of, or if you're proactive and you're putting together mock-ups, then that can really make a huge difference, I would imagine.
It also will help you really interface with the other team more. Marty O'Donnell, who's the composer for the Halo series, had a great offhand quote at it when he was giving a talk at GameSoundCon a few years ago, and he just offhandedly said, "Oh, and everybody should take a programming course." and seriously, and the idea there isn't that you're going to become some great programmer.
Yeah.
It's that you will now understand a lot better how music and sound gets put into a game and communicate better with your fellow team members, because you're in this collaborative effort. You need to be able to understand each other.
And hopefully while you're learning about programming, you don't get sucked in to it, so that you still keep your composer
You still want to be a
on.
musician, yeah.
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 I have a follow-up to that. So in that case, what would be some good resources for a guy like me, just a composer who wants to learn some light programming, knowing how to go into this? Would it be certain books? Would it be classes? Would it be talking to somebody about it? What would you recommend for somebody who doesn't have a lot of programming knowledge?
A great thing would be to look at a local community college and just find a cheap evening, intro to programming class. Don't do anything deeper than that. Just something that'll let you kind of have an idea about what this programming stuff is all about, so you can think of what it is. There are some, there's got to be a gazillion places to learn programming online, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Online courses that are really good, and in fact, we can pose that question on the Facebook group.
On the group, yeah. See if anybody has any.
What a good source for that information.
Online's nice, but there tends to be no substitute for sitting in a room with a bunch of fellow students and having a professor. They call me old-fashioned, but
it's good.
That's totally where it's at. Yeah, that's the best way to do it by far.
Well, for nothing else, it provides motivation for you to actually do it, right?
True, it's true.
Yeah, exactly. Don't want to show up to class empty-handed. Yeah.
Born before everybody else's time. Yeah.
There are also some. Actually, we're talking about technical stuff. Yeah, so there's also, aside from the programming side, there are some pretty technical things about how game audio is done, which not really enough time to go into them here. That's kind of why we have a 2-day conference to go over it. Yeah. But it's not rocket science stuff. It's you guys set up, virtual Vienna Pro stuff.
Yeah.
And plugins and deal with iLocks and all this stuff. It's nothing much more complicated than that, but it's just
cool. It's different,
so if you feel like, hey, I attacked setting up my DAW and and upgrading the Mavericks by myself and set up my my new SSD drives or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, so if you can do that, you can pick this up.
If you can do that, you can learn this. You can learn this stuff. Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. I probably will be calling my community college and getting into this. All right, so our next question is also from Lex, and what he's asking is, from your own experience, what experience has been the most beautiful to you? Meaning the big budget video games or titles that have more creative freedom, the indie titles, stuff like that.
That's a good question. Boy, that's a really good question. I like working on small teams. I like working on projects where I do all of the noise coming out of the game. I'm doing one of those right now for Great Matter of Networking, a guy I met when he was a cubicle programmer right out of college 20-some years ago, when he became a big executive VP at big companies, and now he has his own company. And I like that. I like working with a very small team where you do everything and you can kind of fit the whole thing. I mean, I did Madden football for a number of years, and that certainly was a lot of fun. But it was a very prescripted, kind of here's how we did it last year, here's how we're going to do it this year, and
yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah.
I have a question that's totally on another tangent. Just throw it out there, mix it up. So what are the most common terms for writers sharing publishing in this kind of situation, in particular when you're on staff, or is it different than if you're freelancing? What's up with that?
That's a great question.
Great question, yes.
Compensation in the game industry is, for the most part, completely different than it is for a film. Almost without exception, video game music is done as a buyout work for hire.
Completely buyout.
Completely 100% buyout. So you give them music, they give you money, you shake hands, and that's the end of the relationship.
So they don't ever a composer never gets royalties on the back end from that.
Well, let's be precise about what we mean by royalties. In film, obviously, people have become accustomed to, okay, as the Lifetime movie is shown, I'll get performance royalties on that. There's some bad news, and there's some bad news on that for games. Other than there's a smidgen of good news too. So the bad news is, for the most part, game audio contracts aren't written in a way that allow a composer to get a writer's share of performance royalties. Mm-hmm. That's the bad news. The mitigating factor of that bad news is, for the most part, that amount is $0 anyway. The reason that amount is $0 anyway is because when somebody plays a game, there's no performance.
Yeah. Oh no, is this like the tree in the forest kind of?
No, it sort of is, in the sense that, right, if you write music for a film, right, they exclude the box office broadcast, but you get television or radio or whatever. Well, in games, there's no equivalent. Games aren't broadcast.
Yeah.
So when somebody plays a game, there's no performance royalty incurred, or performance,
And even if you say that there was, how could you keep track of that? How many times a game was played?
How many you turn on your Nintendo and start playing Mario Brothers?
Well, let's be very, very clear.
Yeah.
Now we'll talk about U.S. law. European law is a little different. Okay. Actually, it's very different. U.S. law, if I pick up my Nintendo, or Xbox, stick the disc in, play the game, that is not a performance. Even if I buy a game online, download it to my system, and play the game, that is not a performance. If I'm playing World of Warcraft with you, or Call of Duty with you, or Halo with you online, that's not a performance either. Yeah. That was settled in Yahoo versus ASCAP, or US versus ASCAP.
But that's also like a DVD, right? You buy a DVD, but you don't.
Yeah.
How many times you play that film doesn't matter. Or if
it's like a home personal consumable. It's not a.
I have had a couple game new game composers come to me after the fact, and they said, "Hey, we did this game for a really, really low upfront fee because we thought we'd get performance royalties, and the game company's telling us there are none. Are these being slimy bastards, or what's the scoop here?" And I'm like, No, there simply aren't any to be had. Now, there are a couple of exceptions, obviously. If the music for the game ends up being used in traditional media, then the traditional media
concert hall, right? When they have an orchestra.
Yeah, the whole Zelda orchestra thing going on. I'm assuming that's.
Or for that matter, the South Park did an episode based on World of Warcraft, and they used music from World of Warcraft from that. And fortunately, Activision, the publisher of that game, is an unusually savvy game publisher, and they had all their music registered, and so composers got their composer's share, Activision got their publisher's share, they split it 50-50 for each time the South Park episode airs. But that's a fairly unusual thing. So there is one other piece of performance royalty which is potentially coming around the corner, and that are YouTube video. Those are YouTube videos that are people post videos of themselves playing the game.
We just got that question. Yeah. What about Let's Play videos? Where does that kind of fall into this?
Let's Play videos. We're actually literally a couple of weeks ago had a phone call with some of the executives at some of the PROs to figure out the best way to deal with these things. Because this is where the contract becomes important.
Because it seems like it's good advertising, you know?
Well, the game companies don't mind, but with the game companies, it's a matter of what are the mechanics of how to get performance royalties.
For that.
You know, one of the problems is the reason that most game contracts don't have a provision for writers to get writer's share is just because the game developers have no idea about this. They're totally clueless about it. And if you and a composer come in and say, well, if you let me add this clause to my contract for performance royalties, then there's some magic third, money fairy that will sprinkle money on both of us.
It'll just happen, yeah.
And even though it's completely true, they look at you like you're from Mars, so.
Yeah.
I think whenever we start thinking of fairies, it's time to try.
That's why you know you're on the right track. Yeah, when it's like when we include fantasy creatures, that's when we're doing well.
And actually,
unicorns involved, we're in good shape.
That's one of the things Gang is involved in, is trying to educate the game development community as to what these music rights are and how they can make money from them and how composers can make money from them as well.
Excellent, yeah.
Nice.
So how do composers get paid? Is it by salary, or is it, when they're freelance?
Well, if you're an in-house composer, then you just get a salary like everybody else.
That's it.
And sometimes it's not uncommon for there to be employee bonus pools where if the game does really well, all the money goes into a bonus pool, and then they get split amongst the various team members and so on. So that's common. For the most part, contracts, if you're a freelancer doing a game contract, that's almost always going to be a simple, here's the money, here's the music, thank you very much, goodbye. As you get to the low-end scales, actually things change a little bit, because then you're more likely to have developers not have as much money to spend on music as they would like, and so it's not that uncommon for a savvy game composer to say, well, my usual rate is $1,500 a minute or whatever, but what I really believe in your game, let me waive that or down to a couple $100 in exchange for some piece of the back end. And so when you are dealing with indie games, sometimes you'll see that kind of stuff happen.
So there is a back end, obviously.
There's a potential back end, yeah.
In games, but and I suppose that happens through the sale of the game, but the composer doesn't get any sort of slice of that then.
Are you talking about for indie games or other games?
Just, I guess, indie games. Wherever there happens to be some kind of a back end, there is a back end then.
Depending on the genre, it sounds like, though.
Yeah, if you're working with a very small developer, you may very well be able to negotiate a back end in exchange for lowering your upfront fee. Now that said, that's not always a good idea. Actually, back in the I'm going to date myself here. Back in the late 80s and early 90s, when I was doing a whole lot of games, I was actually able to do games for major publishers where I had a back end. I got a piece of every single game that was sold. And what I learned fairly early on is I could make a lot more money with a higher guaranteed up front and saying goodbye to any potential back end.
Interesting.
Because every single game developer, game designer thinks that their game was going to be the mega hit game. And
the thing, but it doesn't wind up being, Yeah.
So if you say a nickel a game and they're in their heads, well, if I sell 5 million units and that's $250,000, I'm going to pay you. That seems like too much. So instead you say, oh, I'll do it for 125 flat. And of course, the game doesn't sell 5 million, it sells 75,000.
No, but seriously, how did you wind up writing the music for 130 games? That's just I mean, that's just how many. I mean, that's just wild.
There was a few years in the '90s where I was doing about 20 games a year. And, well, you have to remember these games were not the same scale.
Yeah. But still, that's a lot.
I used to one of the things I used to love to do was pinball machines, and pinball machines have about 25 minutes of original score. They've got about 150 sound effects, and some number of lines of dialogue. So
have you figured out how many hours of music you've written?
Oh, I don't know. I should sit down and do that sometime.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to find out. Yeah, I mean, that's just amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, these were not 90-minute full orchestra gigs. These were,
But still, it's like it's completed projects, and 20 is a lot in a year. That's a lot.
Well, I'd say it's not that different than like doing a television series, right?
Oh, he's just being humble. Just a nice guy.
It's incredible, man.
We got more questions.
Oh yeah, of course we do. Yeah. So this is another one from Lex, and what Lex is asking is so are the audio directors on the lookout for fresh talents, or do they prefer keeping strong bonds with established composers? Do they like to take chances from time to time with new names?
Boy, that's another really good question. This Lex is a savvy guy.
Yeah, Lex has got a lot of good questions.
All these people here are very smart. They have amazing questions. Absolutely.
It's been my experience that the audio directors for the major studios are very open to new people, to fresh people. That said, they are also a little, by definition, risk averse. When you've got, these guys are working on Destiny has a $500 million project. You don't want to take chances, and so one of the things you need to be able to do is to garner confidence with people, with these people, and let them feel comfortable that you are, you're safe to work with. And this goes to what you were speaking about before. Be really nice. Be incredibly professional all the time. When you do get asked to deliver a little bit of music for this little project that nobody's going to know, but it's still done by the same company as the big director, it better be on time, it better be great, it better go smooth as silk.
No excuses.
Proactively asking
absolutely.
questions and giving status. One thing that's really different between games and traditional media is developing a game is the process of writing software as much as anything else. And there are certain processes that they follow, beta testing and alpha releases and check-in and check-out windows and all this stuff that's very Greek to somebody who's just been doing films where, that's what you do. And so that's another one of the reasons knowing the stuff can be really helpful. It helps garner confidence in the person who, you want to hire you, that you know what you're doing and that you'll deliver, with a minimum of hiccups. So yeah, they are. Everybody has their own go-to guys, right?
Of course.
Name the audio directors and their go-to composers, but I've seen them bring people in, especially if maybe somebody at one of these demo derbies. They are just really wowed by not just the music, but also the way they've implemented into a game scenario or the way they come across and things like that. So.
Yeah.
You said demo derby. What's a demo derby?
Sorry. Demo derby is one of those things that I talked about, and we're doing one of these at the Game Developer Conference in March. That is, people submit ahead of time 60 seconds of music in front of 200 people, a panel of 4 or 5 composers critique it, and it's 60 seconds and they turn it off.
Is that live broadcast or anything like that? That would be so much fun to look at least later on YouTube or something.
It is available. Unfortunately, it's available through what's called the GDC Vault, which...
Vault, never mind.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
But that's such a great phrase, demo derby. I love it.
And it's really useful because it tends to be one of the most popular sessions at the Game Developer Conference or GameSoundCon or the San Francisco Conservatory thing that just happened, because obviously for the participants, first of all, it's nerve-wracking playing your stuff in front of 200 people and having Russell Brower from Blizzard and Paul Wilson from Microsoft and Marty O'Donnell from Halo critique your stuff, or Austin Wintory, Graham Award-winning Graham Award nominee game composer.
Austin who? Never mind.
Yeah, I forget him. Yeah. But it's also really good for the audience that can then see how the panelists sort of pick apart and critique and offer constructive criticism on the submission. So they're really fun things to be at.
It sounds amazing. Yeah. It sounds really amazing.
It's like opening the entire world for me right now.
See, that's the whole point. That's great.
Great. No, this is awesome. Yeah, I'm loving this.
I'm learning too. I have a question. I'm going to jump right in and ask. So as a composer, you're hired and you're working for this team, whether you're on staff or you're freelancing. Who is approving of your music? Like, as a film composer, you are in general working with the director, or if you're working on TV, it's probably the producer or a combination of that. So who is approving of your music in the game industry while you're composing music for a project?
It again depends on the game itself. One of the most important things as a freelancer is to find out that question, because
who's your boss? That's it.
Well, I was going to say, who signs your checks?
Yeah.
Or who approves your checks?
Yeah.
Usually, if in a company big enough that has an audio director, or a project has an audio director, it'll be the audio director. The audio director may work and consult with the game designer or the game producer.
I see.
Yeah.
So
for a smaller studio.
Yeah, so there are a couple of steps along the way. The composer is working for the audio director, but the audio director is seeking approval from other people up higher in the chain.
Exactly, yeah.
That's a little bit more complicated for a composer, actually.
And depending upon the relationship between the director and the composer, sorry, the audio director and the game producer may simply trust completely their audio director, or then micromanager, or so it kind of is all over the place. I literally have an email, a slide that I give sometimes. This one project I was doing, this was a sound design project, not a music project, but I had always had a hard time figuring out which of these two people I was actually trying to please.
Yeah.
I went to this meeting where they were discussing sound, and they didn't invite me, which blew my mind.
Yeah.
But I got 2 pieces of email, one from each one of these, within an hour of each other after the meeting, and they said exact opposite things as to what their consensus was at their meeting.
So, go for it. Yeah.
That's always a fun place to be in. Just stuck in the middle completely.
With the smaller games, again, the game I'm working on right now, there is, I essentially am the audio director and the composer and the sound designer and everything.
Yeah.
In this particular game, and this is it's not a tiny little game. It's a moderate, decent sized budget game. I have a particular contact that I work with every day, but it ultimately goes up through the president of the company to approve everything.
That's one other reason why working for small groups, as you're saying, is better, because you have fewer bosses, hopefully.
Yeah. In my experience, I'm working with a smaller group right now in a game as well, and for all the approval, it's usually like the creative team. It's like me, and then the designer, and then the head programmer, and then the head creative director, and then the boss of the whole company, all sitting in a room just thinking, okay, what works, what doesn't work. So it really depends on the size, I think, like you're saying.
Yeah. So have you got questions, Steve? More questions?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
So this is from, I hope I'm not butchering this, Pel Zotan Iles. And what he's asking is, so by your experience, about how big of a percentage of the recent big budget game projects music are recorded by real artists as opposed to mock-ups and
actually,
samples?
To answer that question, I'm going to...
I think there's going to be a chart in our future.
I'd say so.
Let's see here. Let me...
This is, this...
We're gonna try cutting-edge technology here.
Yeah, no, it's really great. Google Hangouts is great. It's just always a little bit of a panic just before, and then it works out great. Yes.
So
yes.
I'm going to... can everybody see the GameSoundCon site right now?
Yes. So long as they don't talk. Okay.
Right.
Here,
So
I know what to do. I know what to do. Here we go. Go.
So what I'm doing in this past summer, GameSoundCon did a survey of about 530 audio professionals, game audio professionals, and we published the results, and that was one of the survey questions. So I'm going to scroll around here to see if I remember the data. Work for hire.
Let me know if you want to toggle out, Brian, because I've got your screen frozen. So.
Okay, I've now on my site. You should see a couple of graphs, a couple of pie charts here.
Pie, yes.
People look like they can see those pie charts?
Oh yes, don't worry.
So the top graph is use of live musicians in large budget games. These are the AAA games I was talking about. So the way I broke out the survey was the music 100% virtual? Was at one extreme?
Right.
Was it predominantly live, which I define as
the green? That's the green on the bottom, isn't it?
No,
the turquoise.
The turquoise, yeah. So the largest slice of the top pie is the predominantly live. The purple next to it is the virtual, but with more than 5 live players. So to me, that's sort of a hybrid score, which is very common in games where.
Could you possibly run your mouse, your cursor over it? Maybe, yeah, that's it. So we can see there.
So here's predominantly live. That's live orchestra. Here's some virtual with more than 5 live players. Here's some virtual with less than 5 players that are not the composer. Up here is 100% virtual, no live players, and this adds virtual plus any live instruments the composer themselves played. So this kind of chunk, the blue and the red here, the dark blue and the red, that's single person doing the whole thing. The rest of the pie in large budget games is larger ensembles or larger ensembles combined with virtual orchestra.
That's really good. That's very clear. Yeah.
So the bottom chart, the same question, but in casual games or independent games.
Smaller productions, right? Smaller
budget productions. And not unexpectedly, the overwhelming majority, what's that, about 80%, the blue here and the sort of reddish here, is either 100% virtual or virtual with live instruments played by the composer personally. And then this little sliver here is mostly live players and more than 5 players or less than 5 players. So this is kind of the big difference. This is, if you're doing casual and indie games, you're doing a lot more virtual orchestration. That said, even up here in the big budget games, there's a lot of games that are fully virtual. So having really, really good virtual orchestration chops is really good. It's really important.
Good. So, yeah.
So this survey is on live at GameSoundCon.com. So we cover a bunch of other issues in terms of work environment, compensation, work and environment, additional compensation, use of live musicians, middleware, and contract terms.
And once again, we'll include these links in the comment section below.
And then we come out with this every year, so we'll do another one this summer.
Nice.
It's awesome.
So yeah, you actually don't need me. You just need to go to this site, and we can all just.
I disagree. I think listening to you is pretty helpful.
It's great.
It's really good.
It's fantastic, absolutely.
Have you got any questions to throw out while Brian's kind of looking through his huge...
We've got plenty.
I actually have another fun slide I'm going to throw up while we're waiting there.
It's show and tell time, yes.
Yep.
Great.
I can take another question, though. I'm not talking about this yet.
Well, let's just do it. Show us your stuff. What is this? So USA.
Okay.
Yeah.
About a year ago, I just reading the newspaper came across this article in USA Today. They listed the by job category according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is the governmental organization that puts out like the unemployment report you hear about on the news. They did a study of the top fastest growing job categories in the USA. Number one was oil and petroleum engineer. The number two was also oil related. Number three was music directors and composers.
Whoa.
Which kind of grabbed me. And
yeah.
That's really funny.
And the article postulated that increase in the need for advertising and film was the reason for this jump, but they didn't provide any data for it. So I actually went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics data and looked at the data on a lot more granular level, and I saw this, which is number employed versus year. And in 2008, like a hockey stick happened.
Shoot.
So what happened in 2008 to cause this?
Well, let's look at the next slide.
Okay.
Two things happened. The Apple App Store opened, and Facebook opened up their platform for people to make games on.
Oh. That would do it.
If you correlate this graph with the number of titles released in the industry, it's almost a one-to-one match. Essentially, the number of composing jobs, and the BLS counts only full-time employees here, not contractors, tripled in the space of about 2 years, starting when essentially the casual game category was created. So the reason I put this slide up, and when I talk to students and whatnot, is that there is a whole lot of work in games that isn't the big AAA title games. There aren't a lot of AAA titles made, just in the same way there aren't a lot of Hollywood blockbusters made, but there are an awful lot of these casual games, and they're not all tuna-eating college kids. The audio budgets on some of these games are in the $10,000, $20,000 to $50,000 range for the whole audio package. So there's some nice games here. And one of the nice things is that they don't really take a long time to do. You can, some of these games you can be in and out of in a couple of weeks or a month. So that's why I'm saying you might think that this guy conducting video games live in Brazil, that's Russell Brower, the World of Warcraft composer. But in reality, you're more like this person. So if you don't mind doing these games, it's a great way to get into the industry, get practice doing games, and it can be quite lucrative. I liken it to being a jingle composer.
And it's probably better than being a jingle composer because you're dealing with people who are a little bit more creative than a client who is looking for an advertisement. Honestly.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And also a little bit more fun, isn't it? It's supposed to be fun. It's not about selling the product.
One important thing that I realized I did not answer, list in one of the things, how do you go about getting a job in games? One of them is to play games.
Oh, yeah.
And be able to talk about them. I always make the analogy, if you got, your 10 minutes with Steven Spielberg, and you're like, hey, I really, really want to write the music for the next movie. I'm going to do a great job at it. I'm a killer composer. Here's my demos. And he says, well, what game scores have really inspired you? Or, sorry, what movie scores have totally inspired you? And if your answer is, well, I don't really watch movies, but I know I'll do a great job scoring yours.
The wrong answer.
Wrong answer.
Yeah, not too much. That's a way to lose trust pretty quickly.
So, yeah, I'm not saying you have to go spend 40 hours a week playing Call of Duty, but play a variety of games. There's one person I know, he got his first game job. Literally, he was at the Game Developers Conference. They have these kiosks of indie games that they do occasionally, and he was standing next to this random person playing the game next to him. and they just started chatting. They started chatting about games and graphics and gameplay and sound. They spent 2 hours, and 4 months later, this guy gets a call from that guy who was a game programmer, and that's how he got his first game scoring job, was being able to talk intelligently about games and passionately about them with somebody he met at one of these trade shows.
Yeah, to be able to have a good conversation, it's a excellent skill that'll take you places you never imagined before. Yeah. So have we got any other questions, Steve?
We have a lot of questions, yeah.
Okay,
I'll shut up then.
let's
Great.
go for it then. Yes.
All right, let's go. All right, so this is another one from Lex. So what he's asking is, so could you recommend places around Europe, conferences especially, that you might recommend for people that live on that continent?
Oh, they do have a GDC Europe.
Okay.
There is a conference. It's a little different than GameSoundCon. I suppose it's a competitor. Called Game Music Connect.
Okay.
That's in the UK. Those are the only two I know of off the top of my head in Europe. I'm toying with the idea of doing a GameSoundCon out there, maybe 2015 or 16. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah.
We're all for it. Go for
Yeah.
it.
Be awesome. I think it's a great idea to do that, definitely. There's probably a huge European market they can really pull in there.
Yeah. A nice thing about Europe is a download is considered a performance in Europe.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Oh, see now.
So it'd be good to hook up some European game companies, is what you're
Well,
saying.
no, actually, more like it'd be good to go change your citizenship and do work for European game companies under European law.
Okay,
So it's a little more involved than just getting a gig with a European company.
I hope they understood the distinction there. So that there's actually there are more royalties to be had in Europe if you're a European composer.
Yeah, as a European composer doing work under European contract for European distribution and delivery, you can receive a performance payment, writer share performance payment for game downloads that just started. And if you did a game for Sony in the last 7 years, I literally had a friend of mine who's a composer in Europe say, "Wow, just got my Sony check. It's going to be a nice Christmas."
Wow, so things are very different, and that does not apply obviously to composers here. So
it does not apply to composers here. It does not apply to games distributed here. It does not apply to European composers doing games where when you write a contract, there's a clause that states what laws of what location are used to enforce this contract. And all of the game companies generally use U.S. law, the big ones over here. So there are cases where, and it's just starting, it's very exciting, U.S. were screwed, and this is because of the laws, how they treat music and intellectual property. In Europe, a composer cannot sign away their writer's share, where in the U.S. you can.
Right. Well, those are very great big distinctions with great big consequences. We'll see how it turns out here.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah. Yes, Steve. More questions.
Right. More questions. We got a few more. It's another one from Lex. So what he's saying is, I have played the Hitman trilogy recently and remarked that Jesper Kid, the composer for the games, had his name right before the start menu shows up. How do you think that happened, and is it rare?
That's pretty rare. He probably just has a good agent. Anything is negotiable.
Yeah.
Obviously, the more well-known you are, the more likely you are to be able to have something like that happen. If you can convince them that your name will add panache. Sometimes it happens kind of for free. Sometimes a game developer wants their game to look like a movie, and so they'll put credits up like that. So.
Okay, yeah. It want to be like a cinematic style kind of game almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. This is from, let's see, where are we? So many questions. All right. Another one from Lex. He's asking, could you describe a little of the process of how you go about composing for games, making it interactive with events on screen, especially due to the improvisational context that video games can pose?
Ugh.
Want to get that again? That was a long one. I can get to.
Yeah, we spend a couple days on this.
Question.
The short answer is I liken game music to the job of a theater organist from the 1920s.
Oh, okay, okay.
Or a theater improv troupe from the 1920s. You know, if you're a theater organist, and actually I have talked to theater organists who currently do it. A guy comes to Seattle half a dozen times a year from Canada and does live organ to old black and white movies. It's awesome.
I love that. I love that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And so I asked him a whole lot of questions about this. He said, composers used to, have themes in their head. The chase theme and the love theme and the tension theme and the release theme. And so they would watch the movie and kind of improvise to it with these themes in mind. And that's kind of what a game composer does. If you think about what's in the head of that theater organist, he's got all of these themes. He's got different, kind of arrangements of them in his head. Well, as a game composer, you don't know what's going to happen or when it's going to happen, but you have a circle of things that might happen. And so generally you're composing different bits of music, as short as a few bars or as long as a few minutes, for these different states, whether they're emotional states or action states or things like that. And you kind of lay them all out there. And then this is where the programming part comes in. One of the tricks is to then, as the game's playing, have the game automatically select what music should be playing for that particular thing going on, and have the transition between those different pieces of music be done in such a way that it doesn't sound forced, that it sounds like you just wrote one big long linear cue that just happens to match up with exactly what the player did. That's kind of the goal.
Compositional chops right there to be able to do that.
Yeah. And there's a whole lot of different techniques that we use. One of them is as simple as crossfading different tracks, but we have tools that let us specify that a crossfade will begin only on a measure boundary so that you don't lose the beat. We can say, well, if I'm in the A section and I'm going to this, or if I'm in the love theme and I'm going to the exciting theme and I'm in the first 10 bars of that theme, then play this one measure transition piece that makes me go smoothly into the other piece. And it's like this big jigsaw puzzle that we put together. Another way that we sometimes do things is we'll stack things horizontally or vertically, where maybe I'll have, some percussion and rhythmic and harmonic strings down here, and I've got some fast woodwind runs up here, and then as the game's playing, selectively muting or unmuting or fading these different tracks up and down, I can kind of change the way my music is sounding based upon what's going on. Or we kind of do a mixture of the both. We have horizontal and vertical, and there's a really, really good book that was recently published by Winifred Phillips called A Composer's Guide to Game Music, where she goes over a lot of this in excellent detail.
We'll be putting a link to that in the description as well.
I'm writing it down now.
Absolutely. Great. Another question. This is from Joe Chilcott, and Joe's a buddy of mine from school. He's a great guy, great composer.
Hi, buddy.
Joe's a man. All right. So what Joe's asking is, so what is the cutoff for large budget AAA games to casual / indie? Like, is there like a clear line, or is it kind of like a gray area?
There's probably a more clear line than I was going to answer originally. I'd have to think about this. Most professionally produced casual games have to make money pretty quickly, and with that, and so for those, a $5 million budget is unusually high for a game like that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, again, the big AAAs, that's in the 50 plus range these days, or 30 to 50 plus.
How expensive is the most expensive game so far? Do you know, or maybe somebody?
It's difficult because
we don't know.
Publishers, when they say these numbers, tend to go for the marketing shock, and Activision claims Destiny cost $500 million. That includes a whole lot of marketing. It probably includes a whole lot of BS. That said, it was a solid 4-year project with all brand new tech. Games are still, one of the analogies I also make to film is games are still at the stage where if you were doing a movie, the director would have to invent and build his own camera every time. Okay. So it takes a lot of money to invent and build a camera.
Yeah.
And invent and build a projector. Suppose movie projectors didn't exist, and every movie director had to invent one. That's the way games are right now. So it's really spend lots of money. But I'd say somewhere in the 10 million range is kind of the dividing line.
I was going to say, let's slowly wind down this talk, but maybe a couple more questions from Steve there, if you can find any.
Yeah, of course, we got plenty.
Have a question yourself that you might want to ask? I don't know, but
I've already kind of tagged my own questions along with these other questions, but if I come up with anything else, definitely. Let's see. We've got a lot from Lex. Let's go to Joel Everett. So what Joel Everett is saying is, so sad that America is so behind on these things. Any chance of getting ASCAP or BMI or others to start getting a change in our laws here? What rights do you recommend that we retain as a composer?
Well, nobody listens to what I recommend for retaining rights, so that's
hey, I'm all ears. I mean...
But maybe if there's some idea that you have that you can share with us, then we can have an idea of what would be the ideal.
The U.S. copyright laws are currently undergoing examination.
Yes,
and this is definitely an issue that is coming up. It's related to the streaming Spotify Pandora thing, and one thing that some of us, again through Gang, and working with good buddies of ours at the various PROs who are at the going to Washington for this stuff, is to make sure that games don't get sort of left out of the process, or of the thought bubble, because they are such an important part of media. I would love to see a law similar to that in Europe, where there is this inability to legally give up some legal or moral rights to works, to music that's been created. How that pans out, I don't know, but something analogous to the way Europe does it is semi-reasonable. There are two big differences in Europe. One is that composers cannot sign away their writer's share, and two is downloads are considered partly mechanical and partly performance, where in the U.S. there is no performance aspect to a download. And you combine those two things, and now video game composers have the ability to receive performance payments.
Right. Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Next question, Steve.
All right, this is from Kevin1. And what he's asking is there a way to balance your creative decisions with the director's vision? In other words, have you ever had a difficult time dealing with a director who did not agree with your musical decisions? And if so, how did you work around that?
You guys probably have this in film too. Yeah, that definitely happens.
Yeah.
And it totally depends on the relationship with the director or the audio director.
That's not familiar people, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Beer.
And I hate to sound mercenary, especially since this is on video. But at some point, one of the coolest things about doing games, and I don't mean any disrespect to film, one of the coolest things is we have no idea what we're doing in games. We're just making all this stuff up as we go along. And there's this great opportunity to try new things and push new boundaries and try things technically, try things aesthetically, try new, not things that aren't horizontal or vertical, but are something different. And so there are times where we want to push our game team into thinking outside the box like that. At the same time, if I'm a freelancer, I have to weigh two things. My relationship with this client, because my job is to make their game better and make it, make his life. I don't want him to have to think about music. He just wants it. So the more I push him, the more he's having to think about music. And he also has to think about programming and bugs and graphics and artificial intelligence and input and all this other stuff. So you have to weigh those. And there are some people I work with that I'll push them, and they're happy that I do that. And there are some that it's like,
they just want to get it done in a way.
Give you something that you like, and it'll be great, and let's move on. So it really depends on the personal relationship that you have.
Yeah.
Exactly. How tight you are with the person who you're working with, who you're collaborating with. There has to be some element of safety there. I mean, that's what I always say. Otherwise, it's not a real creative collaboration. Otherwise, the composer turns into a service, a plumber, somebody who just delivers the plumbing.
Exactly. Absolutely on the mark. And you have to remember, and I tell people this too, especially for a large budget game, it does not take as much time to do the music for a large budget game as it does to develop the game, right? It's a team of 150 people working on 3 years for a Call of Duty.
Yeah.
That means that this developer, 3 years out of 80 years of living is a significant percentage of your existence, and they're living and breathing and passionate about this thing. And they have to think about all these different bits about it. And so you want to make sure that you help fit in and support their vision, and challenge them where you think it'll go towards that vision, but back off, because they live and breathe this thing. So you need to make them feel like you get buy-in for it as well.
You can't be that bull in a china shop.
Now that said, sometimes you can. If you're an in-house composer, you betcha you can be a bull in a china shop. Guy Whitmore at Top Top has done a great job. Guy Whitmore was a great bull in a china shop, and the last 2 games that he's done have gotten marvelous acclaim for the deep levels of interaction between music and gameplay and sound.
You're speaking of?
His name is Guy Whitmore,
the
audio director of PopCap Games. Coincidentally, he and I played in an 80s band back together in the 80s.
That's just wild.
Awesome. I love how that kind of stuff happens where it falls into place. We got a couple more questions if we're still up for it.
We kind of are running out of time, so we kind of...
Yeah, I don't want to hold up too long, yeah.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe one more, Steve, and then that's it. How's that?
Sure. All right, let's see.
Maybe yours. How about your question?
Most people are asking questions and I'm also thinking at the same time. I'm like, I should ask that. I'm like, oh, and then that person just asked that. All right, so we have, let's see. All right. So how about this? All right, so in North America, where would you say the hotbeds are for game developers? Where's the big hubs?
Oh, I can answer that one easily. The top 5 states for game development are California, which is first San Francisco. Second is Washington State, Seattle. Third is actually going to be the LA area, even though that's still in California. Close fourth is Austin, Texas.
Interesting. Okay.
And fifth is Boston area, but I think they even include Maryland in the Boston area in this one survey.
Maryland is not anywhere near Boston, but
yeah,
we'll take it.
Yeah. Well, the whole MIT thing, that makes sense, definitely, yeah.
So San Francisco obviously is number 1. Seattle is very, very big into casual games. So yeah, California, Washington, Texas.
Austin, that's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, Austin, Texas. There's a lot of game stuff in Austin, Texas.
Yeah. That's a good question.
Very interesting.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all of your answers, Brian. This has just been absolutely
fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much for doing this.
Have these webinars where me and Steve are like, huh?
Yeah,
No, it sounds to me like Steve mentioned he's doing a game. He's like a hidden stealth.
No, he's totally on all. Don't even.
I'm a ninja, you know.
Totally with it on many levels.
I mean, I'm one of those guys that, I mean, I grew up playing video games, so it's, you know, totally in my life, definitely.
Thank you.
Played today.
Thank you so much, Brian. And thank you all for being here. This has really been absolutely wonderful. Brian Schmidt there. Thank you so much. I just want to.
Brian, you're the best. Thank you so much for doing this.
So much. Say hello to Bellevue, Washington there, all the way up in the northwest corner of the United States. And Wilder Blumenthal, thank you so much. He's in Philadelphia right now visiting family. And I'm Deniz Hughes, and I'm in New York. I will put a whole slew of links down in the comment section below. Also wanted to mention, it being the holidays right now, we're going to have a holiday hangout afterwards offline. But in any case, if you want to join us, please just email me or
drop me a line, drop Denny's a line. We'll make it happen.
Just email me and give me your Gmail, your Google Plus account email address, and we will get you in. Thank you once again, Brian. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise and your goodwill. This has been absolutely wonderful.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brian.
You. And thanks everyone for questions, especially Lex.
Oh yeah.
Lex, yes, that's a great name too. And see you later, everybody. Thank you so much.
See you, everyone.
Take care. Take care. Bye.